I'm Kerrie Waring. I'm Chief Executive of the International Corporate Governance Network over 20 years ago now, by institutional investors, really as capital was globalizing around the world and investors really wanted to understand what the governance regimes were like in the markets that they were sending their money to. So that's how ICGN was really established, and we are today a group of investors representing around 70 trillion of assets under management, based in over 42 countries. And essentially our mission is to preserve and enhance long-term corporate value through good practices of stewardship and governance, ultimately contributing to long-term corporate value creation, which brings us to then contributions towards sustainable value creation for economies, societies and the environment. So I love the question around the evolution of stewardship codes, because for me, I think it's been around for over 25 years. I mean, if we all think back to the wonderful code that Sir Adrian Cadbury introduced, that had a very explicit section, Section E, which was very much focused on the role of institutional investors, which focused specifically on the need for them to make considered use of their votes and also to enter into constructive dialogue with companies. Now they of course are two key pillars of the stewardship codes that you see around the world today. So when we think about evolution, I do think it goes back to really when almost corporate governance began in terms of the codes. I think the next kind of milestone in the world of stewardship, and this is probably little known, but ICGN itself published its own stewardship code. Unfortunately, we didn't call it a stewardship code at the time. We called it the Statement of Institutional Investor Responsibilities. And in fact, the 4 or 5 key recommendations in that statement are again what you will commonly see in stewardship codes around the world today. Of course, in 2008, we experienced the great financial crisis and then the introduction of the fantastic stewardship code in the UK, which has been emulated around the world, along with the ICGN's code, to really help inspire the development of codes around the world. And I think today there are around 19 stewardship codes. What's brilliant about them is they provide a really good roadmap for investors to firstly understand what the heck stewardship is all about, and then enable them to report to their clients and beneficiaries based on the expectations of the code. So stewardship codes don't work in isolation. They are the sister to the corporate governance code. And I think what we often forget is the importance of the comply or explain system and the way in which those two very key documents interplay together. So stewardship is all about understanding the responsible ownership practices of investors and how they exercise their ownership rights, which includes engagement with companies. What do they engage on? They engage on the subjects which are usually described in the national, or in ICGN's case, Global Corporate Governance Code. And the Corporate Governance Code sets out a whole array of expectations around things like board quality, corporate reporting, remuneration, and so on. So both codes work together, and if I was to say something that needs to be improved upon, it probably is the interplay between the two of them and the understanding that these are frameworks for discussion. I think you know, there is also a conversation around how to strengthen stewardship codes around the world, following suit, for example, from the excellent model that we have in the UK. And so it could be that more markets look to strengthen the accountability mechanisms of codes. I think we should also acknowledge that I think there's around 16 or 17 codes, and then you have the FARMA and then the ICGN code. So there is lots more room for many more codes to be developed, and we hope to inspire them. Corporate reporting and auditing are absolutely essential to facilitate the dialogue between companies and investors. Without it, it's almost impossible to be effective stewards because you've got nothing to assess. So it's absolutely paramount that investors have access to investment decision-making information, investment useful decision-making information. And actually one of the impediments to effective stewardship is around the lack of robust sustainability corporate reporting. So we were delighted with the establishment of the International Sustainability Standards Board, the work that EFRAG and GRI are doing, and many of the standard makers around the world. So seeing a harmonisation of global standards on sustainability reporting probably is almost the next milestone in terms of stewardship. It then enables investors, of course, to be able to identify who the leaders and laggards are in terms of their actual performance against things like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So it's all part of the conversation. Corporate reporting and auditing is absolutely essential in order for it to be possible. Yeah. Investors are always focused on an array of governance, sustainability issues. I think what's happening at the moment is there's a lot of focus, particularly on environmental priorities, such as clearly climate change or biodiversity loss. So a lot of energy is being focused on those critically important systemic risks. Additionally, of course, we have an array of social related risks, actually inspired is probably the wrong word, but promulgated, if you like, by the COVID crisis. So the importance of social factors has really been elevated as an important subject for investors to focus upon. One of the consequences of this focus on environmental and social priorities, however, has been almost a neglect of the importance of governance priorities. And by governance priorities, I mean ensuring that you have a board of really high quality, ensuring that you have effective incentives, ensuring that you have proper committees and structures and leadership to enable the achievement of environmental and social priorities to actually take place. So my message would really be that ICGN members are concerned with lots of things, but I would not like us to lose sight of the fundamentals of governance as probably the major priority for everyone.